this is the perfect opportunity to do an as-is sales contract. So currently, the majority of closings here in Naples, despite my objection, the majority of them are still standard sales contracts. It's what we call a repair contract. And the as is smaller proportion of deals. But on condos, I think that should switch now because the standard contracts, they're confusing. It's hard to explain to a buyer and let alone a seller as well, what a defect is and what cosmetic is. If you're going to throw in the mold and radon, let's say you change, they've got the mold. There's a mold addendum that you can use now in NABOR. And that one basically says, any kind of mold would be considered a defective item. And then there's some agents that use addendums that say, an old water heater is a defective item, even if it's working, and things like that. I wouldn't do any of that. I really wouldn't. I just do a 7-day as-is inspection on any condo. Don't get into the weeds on whether it's defective or cosmetic. And if the buyer wants out, yeah, they're going to terminate. But guess what? They were going to terminate anyways. And I suppose, the next question, the evolution of that would be, well, what if I want to give them more than 7 days? What if they're asking for 12 days? What if they're asking for 15? Should we still use an as is? Um, that's going to be up to you. If it was me, I would push pretty hard for as is contracts because it makes my job easier. It really does. Terminations are hard enough when it's an as is contract. It's brutal on a seller and the agents get upset, I get upset. But when it's a standard and we're fighting over the deposit and whether something was defective or the seller said yes, or did I make a mistake in how I did the form, that's a nightmare. So don't turn a bad day into a week-long nightmare. And the best thing I can suggest is to use an as-is contract. And people that have followed me for a while now know that I feel strongly about that. Not all of them do it, but I am seeing a lot of progress in that way, and always curious what people think. Using an old NABOR form could result in a contract that is voidable by buyer prior to closing. Therefore, it is very important that you review and understand these changes.